Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance's Crypto Roundup for Friday, March 6th, 2026. Ron Quaranta here with my amazing friends and co-hosts, David Brill and the one, the only Ashley Klayman. It's good to see you both. David, you were missed. You'll have to tell us about the yacht you were on. Before we begin, our usual disclaimers for everyone in the audience on LinkedIn Live and YouTube and X. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've got questions for David or Joshua, please put them in the chat. We're happy to address them. And obviously, our usual disclaimers, everything we're talking about is not investment or legal advice whatsoever, and it really represents our own personal opinions, not the opinions of our firms. David, it's good to have you back, buddy. Adam's going to have to come back on a regular basis because he knows how the sausage making works in Washington, David. But David, where have you been, man?
I was actually in snowy New York on a plane back, having to truncate my trip from 4 days to 1.5, but had a lot of good meetings. I really spoke to some of our peers in the industry and talked about some of the things that they're focused on, and we'll talk about that in this edition.
Yeah.
I was not on a yacht. I was flying back up from New York, and I did flying down from New York, but I was able to catch some of Adam's and last week's podcast, and I thought you all did a great job. Adam really has a great talent in explaining what goes on in a way that I think is really reachable for everyone, even if they're not interested in the sausage making in Washington. So I think that was a valuable episode for those who didn't get a chance to see it.
Josh,
David,
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, should we say something about David's crystal ball?
I should say something about David's crystal ball and the fact that he couldn't stay away, even getting on a plane, and submitted commentary, Josh. So let's do it.
Yes. So, David, your crystal ball, it was right. Again, what's going on?
I really had a feeling that we were going to attack Iran that weekend. And so I just wanted our listeners to just be mindful of what might happen if we did. And it did sort of play out that way. And it's, all kidding aside, I just felt like we weren't spending 2 or 3 weeks of time moving all these ships and planes and logistics. It wasn't there for show. And so I really did feel like at a certain point we were going to see an attack, and I just kind of felt it was that weekend.
Yeah.
So everyone who's watching, I'm just going to plug for a moment David Brill. So if you have an investigation or something that you need done, David can see all the clues. Yeah. I don't know. I'm really impressed. Seriously.
It's eerie, though, Josh. It's a little eerie how accurate he is on some things.
It is. And I do have to say, were you surprised about the outflows after the attack on Iran? I was looking at that with the crypto. Are you surprised? Were you guys expecting that?
David, you go first, buddy.
I would just say I wasn't surprised, although several days this week we did see some inflows.
Yeah.
Look, last time, Bitcoin went down about 15%. I think we went down less this time, and we stayed almost flat for the week. I think we went down less this time because we're just at a lower base. And I just think there was a lot of selling that's been done. What do you think, Ron?
I agree with you. I think, look, there was a bit of the perception from a geopolitical perspective that maybe this will be brief. And again, I don't want to minimize armed conflict like this, David. We all know that there's a human cost and an economic cost to all of that. I think that was reflective in some of this kind of knee-jerk buy, particularly of Bitcoin. I think we touched 73 a day or so after the war began. I think part of the concern always ends up becoming, what is the disruption to oil supplies? And that's always a little bit unclear because you really can't get a straight story from anyone. There's this conversation around, we will not allow Strait of Hormuz to be blocked, and then you hear overseas it is blocked, and then we're hearing options about oil being delivered through other means and other ports. So it's a difficult geopolitical situation, David, that just adds to, I feel like there's just volatility everywhere in the ecosystem. It's jobs data, it's macro, it's war, it's Congress, which is its own series of issues. It's a complicated ecosystem.
And guys, am I correct in seeing something? I don't know. You guys might have shared it with me, or I may have made it up. But that a lot of the inflows are coming from retail. Is that the case, or is
I
that?
don't remember mentioning it coming from retail. I did note that some of the data indicated it was coming from retail, but I'm not quite sure how accurate that was, and I haven't even double checked the source. David, you may know better.
No, I'm not sure. Although I do think that the boomers, as everybody jokes around, and continue to hold, have strong hands. They have it in their retirement accounts, and they're not trading it. They're just holding on to it.
Yeah.
So kind of consistent with other positions. But we're not sure if it's retail, but retail definitely has not made a sustained comeback to the markets, for quite a while now. So that's something to keep an eye on. I do want to I'm going to give my macro take, even though I'm
Yes, please do.
I was a history, I'm poli-sci major and all that, but my take is that our government was prepared and the Israeli government's prepared, and I think they have a game plan. It may not be, I know there is different articulations of what's going on. There's a clear game plan to degrade the military, strength, both on the nuclear and conventional side. I think their main question is, can we affect, regime change? But I think what we do have to remember is that they've inflicted enough damage that I don't know if Iran has any conventional ships left. It sounds like they only have small boats and drones. And so I've got to believe that there was some more planning around how to deal with the Strait of Hormuz. And I think we'll see in the next week actions taken to reflect that and to reopen it, or maybe just be guiding ships through it. I think the government said they'd provide insurance for the tankers. So I think that we'll probably see some, resolution on that issue next week, or working towards that. The last thing, and it's I heard somebody else say this today, but America, export, we're a net 4 million barrels a month, extra. So we're exporting that oil. So for us, we may see some small price increases, but for the U.S., we have more than enough oil for our domestic needs.
Josh, can I segue for a second?
100%.
How did I not know that you majored in poli-sci?
I don't know. Now you know.
Now I know. I minored. That explains the weird macro political conversations that David and I have, Josh. David, can I just weigh in on that? And I'm with you on kind of setting the stage for geopolitical, and we generally don't go deep down that rabbit hole per se, but I think when we talk about regime change, I don't want to minimize the fact that regime change is really, really messy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of unknowns, and it's not clear that there is a plan there. They may be, I'm not minimizing whether or not there is, but in the absence of that clarity, that is more volatility in markets.
Yeah. Look, and I totally agree. And I, like you, do not in any way want to diminish the lives lost, whether it be our 6 servicemen, any Israelis' losses that they've suffered. Like we've had civilians in Israel, who were killed from indiscriminate bombing. I do think, just the last thing I will say is that we do have to remember that Iran has, been adversarial to the U.S. for many years. There's been bombings in Lebanon. There's been taking of hostages. So this was never a regime that was friendly to us, and regime change may be hard, but if we are able to create some lasting peace with regime change, it could really change the whole tenor of the region, and people could focus on building and doing positive things rather than fighting these ongoing wars. So there is a lot at stake, and I think a lot of positive actions are potentially somewhat around the corner.
Yeah, I was talking to some friends and slash clients in Dubai, and I guess on the ground there, it's very much like the kids are home, like they said it feels like COVID, right? So they're waiting to see what happens, because obviously their airport and various other things were subject to attacks. But so yes, totally agree. Don't want to minimize any of this. A lot of people are out there and experiencing some challenges right now. I do want to say, on a positive note, unrelated to this, as you guys said, the price stayed pretty flat overall, right? At least from what I've seen. And so with all those outflows, there must have been inflows. And there was some really big news this week, right? We saw a lot of great news. We saw Morgan Stanley. Do you guys want to talk about what Morgan Stanley has done?
Yeah.
Shout out to
Well,
Morgan Stanley.
shout out to Morgan Stanley. David, Josh, I'm happy to kick it off. So there were two bits of news that I saw that were really impactful. One is their application for Bitcoin ETF. And item number two was their application for a bank charter. And I think we can't overestimate how important those are. And it makes me think of something, Josh, if I could, David, that you said earlier. It's a weird parallel, but you talked about ships in the Middle East, and I don't mean to make it geopolitical, but like, oh, the ship and millions of tons moving, that doesn't happen for nothing. When I look at the markets and how they're developing, and I look at news from Morgan Stanley, they don't do that stuff for nothing. They don't build like that without a thought that this is going somewhere in the future. David, Josh, do you agree?
Yeah, I certainly agree. And I know we've helped companies get, help support them in their charter applications, doing, policies and procedures. And, look, it's time consuming work. Everybody thinks you can just sort of like cut and paste another policy and procedure.
It's not easy to become a bank?
No, I mean, well, the cutting and pasting part is easy, but the actual making the procedure reflect what the company is actually doing is not easy. So, there's a lot of work that goes into that. I think another thing for our audience to keep in mind is that, Morgan Stanley having their own ETF makes a lot of sense, because if they want to sell it to their clients, I don't think that they really make a profit by selling another branded ETF to their customers. I think the real profit is in having their own ETF, selling it to their customers. So that's something to keep in mind too. And I think that had been an impediment for some of the other banks, because they weren't really incentivized to sell other banks' ETFs to their customers, or they made very small, minute gains on that.
Yeah. And it's not just going to be for high net worths, right, David? Or am I misunderstanding Morgan Stanley's strategy?
No, I think it's going to be broad. I think it's going to be broadly available. I think the question is, will they allow customers to have it in their retirement accounts? That's a separate issue, and that will happen over time too, I feel.
Yeah. So, Josh, can I ask a question?
Of course.
I think one of the things that's fascinating, and we should really talk about it for the audience, we have this in our legal working group meetings and other meetings, David, crypto asset working group meeting, this big drive to everyone wants to be a bank. And I'm thinking about Kraken getting access to Fed master accounts. I think it might be a skinny account, Josh. You may know better than I do, but that's sort of important for the ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say, yeah. And I would like to say also, while I'm thinking of it, shout out to Jess Chang, who just joined Sidley, who is the lawyer on that. I mean, bravo. And also congratulations on joining Sidley. But yeah, no, it's a big deal. I mean, we've certainly seen, although it's, not identical, of course, but we've seen the effort that Custodia has gone through for all these years, trying to get a Fed master account. So I think while the skinny account is skinnier, right? It still is, a momentous achievement. And I think it bodes very well, frankly, for the future of also state chartered institutions and not just the federal path.
Is it an administration change that made all of these banking kind of charters possible? Again, I'm thinking of Kraken, we're thinking of Morgan Stanley, there have been others. I mean, David, Josh, I'm trying to understand, did it suddenly become easier, or is it just suddenly more acceptable? And is there systemic risk that a lot of critics point out?
Good questions. I think it is this administration and a willingness to, whether they be regulations around custody, removal of some of the impediments to banks holding crypto, the accounting treatment of crypto as SAP 121. I think all of those things, and an administration that supports this ecosystem in the totality of things, is what's made things move. I also want to give credit to David Wysocki, and I'm going to read a little bit of what he shared in our Slack channel, talking about master accounts. And he said that Kraken gets access to cheaper and faster fiat movement at lower costs by eliminating bank intermediaries. Plus, they eliminate bank counterparty risk and debanking risk by getting a direct payment access to the Fed. So, that's important. And that's a big benefit. So these, crypto companies have been at a disadvantage. Their borrowing costs have been higher. Their access to capital is higher. And so now this is, evening the playing field some.
Yeah. But David, to that point, go ahead, Josh. I keep cutting you off. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, you're absolutely right, David. I mean, I have clients that are trying in the future, right? Like as part of their longer path to get a Fed master account, just to get rid of certain bank intermediaries. And I think, but that's been something where it was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Like looking at the various tiers, right? For review, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and how you're going to structure things. It's been seen as such like a far off path with no one having really from the crypto space having achieved it in the way that some are envisioning. And now with Kraken, I feel like it's a new time. But I'm sorry, Ron, go ahead.
No, I just, building on all of that, one of the conversations that we seem to be involved in on a regular basis, and we have colleagues, respectfully, we have colleagues in banks that are not crypto focused. We have colleagues in banks that are crypto focused. There seems to be this ongoing argument politically in DC that, David, Josh, it's a zero-sum game, meaning if the banks win, crypto loses. If crypto wins, then the banks lose. And I think, David, you mentioned David Wysocki. Shout out to David. But I think there's a good point to be argued that it is not a zero-sum game. There's a market for some of what crypto firms offer and the access that they have to Fed accounts. And there's a market for, what a large money center bank offers. Is that a kind of a naive perspective on my part?
Well, I don't think it's a zero-sum game. It just means that there's more competition. That's really what it means. And that, now, if you can earn yield on stable coins or rewards or however we want to phrase it, people have options. I mean, I think the banks have benefited from offering next to nothing, an interest rate on deposits. And they've been really able to take advantage of the spread. And the whole fractional banking system, gives them a lot of leverage. And so we're seeing other players in the market who want to have, some of those benefits and also offer higher yields or rewards to customers. So I don't think it's a zero-sum game. I just think it means that there's, more competition. And look, there is a benefit in that if regular customers, regardless of whether they're holding stable coins or not, can suddenly get 3% on their savings deposits versus 0.1%. I mean, that's a benefit for everybody. So I don't like to think of it as a zero-sum game. I just think that it will add more competition into the marketplace.
David, thinking back to your equity analyst days, net interest income is a nice juicy number on banks' income statements, and they want to keep it that way. So we do get that. Josh, you've been sending the chat, and she chats faster than I can think.
I was just going through some of the differences between the skinny master account and the regular master account.
Right, so. which puts the rest in my mind some of the arguments, including in DC, that there'll be systemic risks. They're trying to destroy the banking industry because they don't have access to the Fed discount window. They don't have access to emergency facilities. It really is, I guess I can use the phrase narrow banking, and we've heard that phrase before. It's a very specific use case. And I think the Fed understands that.
Yes, and they can't earn interest on reserves. Unlike regular accounts, they're capped at a certain percentage to limit the Fed's exposure and things like that. So but sorry, David, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I just think I was going to also add that they can't lend. Like this is only one-sided, so they're not creating that risk in the lending side of things.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. I did read, I met Dave Weisberger at a conference at the Sidley conference, and he wrote something that cracked me up with regard to the banks, weighing in on stable coins and saying he didn't remember in his civics lessons that the banks had a say on whether legislation gets approved or not. And so I literally laughed out loud, so I wanna cite him on that because that was quite amusing. But it
He's a
does feel
sharp
like,
mind.
yeah, and it does feel like, the banks are having a bit of a final say on this. And look, I think all constituents need to be at the table, and I do think there's a path forward.
Yeah.
Just curious, and I'm curious to know what Josh thinks, but like with what's going on in Iran, with maybe going on in the oil markets and other markets, what does that mean for clarity?
Oh,
I mean,
he's
it's a good question. By the way, David Wysocki clarifies that it's a 1-year trial grant, by the way, on our other topic about this getting master accounts. But yeah, what does that mean for clarity? I mean, I think that in our last session, it was said very well by our special guest that I think actually, no, it wasn't said then. It was said in a different forum that I let me just back up on that. So what I've heard is that even though it seems like things are not necessarily moving, there was movement in the same committee just
Yep.
in the past week about some sort of, I don't remember if it was a housing bill or some sort of legislation, but it moved through Senate banking, I believe, and they were able to include in it a ban on CBDCs, I think till 2030. So I think what that shows is that, when people are focused on it, and if there is enough agreement, like things are getting done, things can get done. That, as I understand it, moved very swiftly. Again, not 100% sure it was about housing. But I'm just recalling that there was in fact a bill. So yeah, I mean, things are still happening, but I think that obviously the ongoing discussions about yield and interest, they are still, those points are still open. And so I think that seems to be, at least to this point, some of the bigger gating items.
Yeah.
Is that the biggest challenge left? I mean, if the three of us remember when the conversation around clarity started, it was DeFi as well. There was, Josh, we brought it up. I brought it up, I think, in our last legal working group meeting to get some perspectives on the ethics issues that seem to be raised. Is it simply, the interest on yield that's left in the conversation about clarity?
So I don't know if that's the only issue, but certainly it's a big issue. And I know when we last had our call, the OCC's proposal had just come out, and
Yep.
you guys may have seen, there's a lot in there, right? And one of the things, as was discussed a little bit on our show last time, was that with respect particularly to foreign issuers, right, there's the staking out of a path by the OCC, a proposed path, right, and a position, like it or not, with respect to issuer linked, right, yield. There also, though, is a question in there that says something along the lines of, do you think we should even go further? Right. So it is interesting. I say that just because this is being debated in Congress right now.
Yeah.
And there's also, an opportunity to comment publicly. So.
Yeah. And Josh, to that point, full disclosure for everyone watching, we did see the OCC's all 324 pages, thank you very much, of notice of proposed rulemaking, and we will be commenting on that with some WSBA members, Josh. But David, Josh, just if I could add to that, we see OCC dropping things related to Genius, which is the NPRM. We've seen regulators, both SEC and CFTC, moving forward on some levels of structure associated with crypto, if I can keep using the word structure. I guess the question becomes, how much is left that needs to be covered by legislation? I know it's probably a question for Adam or some of our other policy experts, but it feels like the government is trying to build as much as they can from a framework perspective until and when we get clarity from legislation. Is that a fair assessment? They keep doing the work.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. Look, I think that while, we have all these things going on, and outside of the traditional work that Washington's doing, there is a core group of people who are still focused on this, who are having meetings on this, whether it be the banking committee, whether it be, counsel to some of the senators involved or representatives involved. So I think things are moving forward. It's just the calendar is starting to not look like our friend a little bit. So I think that's going to be an issue. Is like, are we going to get too far along in the calendar, and then people start running for, re-election, and unfortunately, this doesn't get the time and energy it needs.
But
So,
that point,
Josh, you're benefiting from Ron and mine's miners and poli sci here. You're really getting the 360 view today.
I love it. I mean, I have heard, that at this point, people, there are potential incentives on each side, whether you are, the community banks, for example, or certain crypto natives, that there's an incentive on both sides if it's not going to be the right law, not to, and whatever right law means for you, right? Like no matter what your perspective is, that maybe it's, better not to have a law. What I would say from my perspective, just as a human in the space is, is just, Ron, when you ask, what do we need? It would be really fantastic to get some kind of clear statement that yes, the SEC does have this purview. And yes, the CFTC does have this purview, so that then all of this amazing rulemaking that they're doing and guidance that they're giving will be less likely, to the extent, one likes what they're doing, right? It will be less likely to be subject to challenges of being beyond the scope of their statutory authority.
Yeah, and I do want to give some kudos to regulators. I know that sounds weird in a broadcast like this, but when you look at the SEC and CFTC, digital assets are not the only thing on their plate. They've got prediction markets, they've got gambling markets, they've got private markets, they've got it's hard work. So to the extent that they're moving forward on some of this, kudos to them. Josh, David, can we talk about the economy? Because it's starting to drive me bananas. David, Josh, the jobs numbers came out today, and the estimates were, you'll love this, David, I think you might have seen it already. We should be up 55,000 jobs in February. We were down 92,000 jobs in February. So immediately I thought of, this data can't be right. What are the revisions? David, what did you think about some of that data? And Josh as well. And it was interesting where some of those job losses happened, in healthcare, in hospitality as well. What is this pointing to? Kind of a downtrend in the economy that might lead to interest rate cuts?
Boy, these...
Or do we not trust the data?
I mean, they're so hard to prognosticate. I think it's almost as hard to prognosticate as the weather. Because if you're a weather person, it seems like you get many passes. Look, I could see the weather. We had bad weather in the Northeast, and that may have impacted some of the jobs. Maybe it impacted some hospitality. Maybe people weren't traveling, or their plans were, changed. Yeah. Maybe there were some changes in hospitality. Like maybe people weren't coming from the Middle East, places they didn't want to travel. But these were January's numbers, and this really was ramping up in February. So it's really hard to reconcile. But the one thing I do want to say is, we did see Block's announcement, even though I think it was in March, of significant layoffs, and some other white collar companies doing layoffs because of gains in AI and automation. So maybe we saw some, signs that this was going on, and we just collectively didn't connect the dots on it. But it does seem like a big miss. But maybe maybe this number is one that doesn't get revised, and this is really more accurately what was going on in February.
This number is definitely going to be revised. I am not.
All right, materially revised.
Fair point. But David, you do lead to something, and Josh, I'd love your opinion on this as well, because I wonder if AI is taking away some of the impetus in blockchain and digital asset development and investment as well. There's a bright, shiny thing aspect to a lot of what's happening in the market, in my opinion.
Go ahead, Josh.
I think that's right. I think some of it also, beyond just being a bright, shiny thing. And I love crypto. I love our space. But, like even in legal practice right now, the use of AI, like approved legal AI, not, not other types of AI that we're not allowed to use in legal practice, that you can see the efficiencies that you're gaining. You can, or even if you go on, like, for example, Google right now, and you Google something, you have the AI option. And you know what? It's pretty good. Like obviously buyer beware, but like, I think it's one of these things where crypto, apart from the many things that digital assets can stand for or do, in many respects, the infrastructure, right, and the security and other things like that are part of or a huge component of the value add, like the trustless nature of it. And that is a little harder to experience, right? Whereas with the AI, yes, it's a shiny new thing, but it's also something I think where people can be like, hey, this is really affecting me. This is really working. Whereas if, to the extent that, and this is happening, the biggest companies in the world, the largest banks, the, huge financial system players, right? They are using blockchain technology or migrating to tokenization and things like that. And I think it's maybe a little harder for the average person to experience that.
Yeah. And I think that leads to what we've said many times, Josh. Builders keep building, even if they're building in the background, because it is long-term strategy on what are the services they're going to offer and how does that impact the business that they have. So I'm with you. As a total aside, I've been diving into AI a bit as well, Josh, and I started reading a book on AI prompting, and I realized I ask AI really dumb things. That why it gives me really dumb answers. So prompt engineering is important. So you're absolutely right, Josh.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've been really I've gone down the rabbit hole. I also think AI has taken some of the momentum out of crypto because regular people can use AI in their everyday jobs.
Right.
And we're not at the point yet where we're at mass adoption of crypto for everyday activities.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's my hope that we will get there soon. And I will again reiterate that I think we lost 4 years of evolution of the crypto ecosystem in the US because of, the previous administration and the SEC. But I think that's part of the problem too. And I think, companies are seeing, automating tasks. And so I think of crypto and blockchain as sort of like, it's a user needs to do something with it to enable it, where AI is sort of implementing things that a user doesn't have to do. It can kind of work in the background, the agents and things like that. So I think that's how I see them working together.
Yeah.
But I do think last thing is that I do believe that blockchain will be able to be the verifier of proof or what you get from AI. And, if AI spits something out, the blockchain can be there to verify if this is true or not.
Yeah, Rumi from Lagos, Nigeria sends love. Thank you for watching so much. Josh, I'm just going to say it. Do you think that David is using AI to optimize his crypto trading strategy? I'm pretty sure that's part of what he uses it for, but I'm trying to figure it out.
I mean, you never know. For years, like some big personalities on Twitter. Actually, I shouldn't say that big, but like some people, maybe I'll rephrase, some people in our space in crypto that I'm aware of for years and years and years before AI was like, as popular as it is now, was using it for their tweets, right? And they got like the best like tweets, like they I guess posts now, but they got like a large following based on that. I feel like obviously you have to be so careful with stuff, but it makes it so much easier to do so many things. So I don't know. I'm excited about it. But one thing I have a question for you guys about is altcoins. I think we saw an article. Sorry.
She went there, David. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there was an article saying that, I don't remember what the percentage was, like 38% or something like that. I'm making this up, of altcoins were at their all-time lows. And what I'm wondering, I tried reading that article and was looking into it a little bit. But, and none of this is price advice or investment advice, of course. But one of the things that I've seen floated, and I don't remember if it was in that article or somewhere else, was this idea that a lot of these are zombie coins, right? Where there hasn't been a lot of work for a long time and people have just been holding it for a long time. And now that's what's happening, is like they're inflowing from that, they're exiting that and then inflowing to like other assets, whether it's other digital assets or it's, you know, other types of assets entirely. What do you guys think?
I mean, I'm going to leave that to alt guru David because he's forgotten more about alts than I'm ever going to know. But I do have some thoughts.
Well, I mean, look, there's some alts that we know are just sort of like meme coins, and you know, people are buying them just for sort of volatility and to trade. I think, you know, you can really see what the activity on coins by really with the altcoins. Like if you really look in their GitHubs or you really look at like what is going on with the coins, are they developing things? Are people using it? And so that's, I think, a better way to think about utility. But then I think, you know, AI and other industries have become more attractive. I really think that the AI stocks in the prediction markets have siphoned off a lot of that sort of gambling instinct that was in altcoins, and that's where the liquidity's gone.
Yeah. And to add to that, David, I think you and I have had this conversation for many years. There's where there are use cases, they make sense, and it'd be interesting to see how they develop over time. A vast majority of them, and again, Josh, to your point, this is not investment advice, are not worth the time, in my opinion. And look, people want to speculate. If you want to speculate, that's fine. Just be aware of the risks. To me, that's like buying a lottery ticket. So we've only got a little bit of time left. Josh, and David, can we pivot to one last question I've got?
Sure.
Can we talk about quantum? Because I'm wondering how much of that is impacting some of the conversation about digital assets. And Josh, everyone knows you're also a quantum guru, but we can have that conversation separately. But I've seen news recently. I think Vitalik had posted about Ethereum working towards quantum resistance. We keep hearing about that. How important is that to some of the market action that we're seeing? David, Josh, is that kind of holding it back as well? This fear that, well, quantum is going to bust everything open in the next couple of years?
Go ahead, Josh.
Well, so listen, like I feel like the drumbeat has gotten a lot louder, of course, about quantum. And yes, I do think that it is having an effect. Certainly there's even been an article that I saw just a short while ago talking about construction beginning at a quantum facility big enough to, quote, break Bitcoin. Yeah. So I just think, this has been on the horizon, like, or actually way, way far away on the horizon for a long time.
Yeah.
And I just think now people are very focused on it. I do think, though, I don't actually know, I should look into this more, about how much is like truly sweeping changes with respect to quantum and our closeness to achieving powerful enough systems versus us looking at how fast AI has evolved and taken over in so many ways, and whether people are now focusing on this. I also think some of this may be driven in part by professional investors, right, who are looking for new places to put funds, right, and get returns. But I mean, I do think it's a risk. I hope we'll do the webinar that we were contemplating soon.
I promise.
Yeah, but yeah, would love to hear your thoughts, guys.
So I'm probably not as well steeped in quantum right now as you are, Josh, although I'm eagerly working to get there. My take is that maybe this is why some of the OGs are selling. That maybe that they see a risk of quantum to their holdings and they've made such huge profits that they see this as maybe this is one of the reasons why they're like, you know what, I've done amazingly well. I'm going to take some money off the table. And this is a reason why we've seen some OGs selling. So that's going to be my hot take.
I will add 2 points to that, Josh, if I could. One is, David, I'm with you why the OGs might do that, but respectfully, I think that really betrays sort of not understanding what's really happening behind the scenes in quantum. Josh, you and I talked about this. This kind of, bad actors are harvesting keys and will
Yes.
crack them open with quantum computing. But there's also, like, call them white hat operators working very hard in quantum to build
100%.
quantum resistance for cryptography. But I think it also minimizes. Quantum is very complicated stuff, Josh. You and I have talked about it. We've talked about it with some others. Decoherence of qubits, for those who are interested in the fact that Josh and I read boring stuff about this, it's very expensive to do quantum computing. It is very tough to do it accurately. It has a very high power consumption challenge. So I get the concerns about, it's a year or two away. I think it's way further away than that on a commercial basis. And I think people are working in the background to make it, to protect against it, but also make it a tool for what we need to do.
I think that's right. I also would just point, and I have to verify this because I'm not sure that it is, like, all caveats apply to what I'm going to say. Okay. My understanding is that I believe it was CoinShares had done some sort of research this year about, the potential impact on Bitcoin. And I think what I had read somewhere, again, all caveats apply, was that even if, quantum can, quote, break Bitcoin, that only something like 10,200 or so Bitcoin are actually sitting in, have wallet addresses with publicly visible crypto keys, right? And are also quantum vulnerable. And a sell-off of that number of Bitcoin, I think it was quoted, would, quote, resemble a routine trade. I just double checked while I've been saying it aloud. This is reported also in Cointelegraph in its article, which has the title that I had mentioned, Construction Begins at Quantum Facility Big Enough to Break Bitcoin. So they're referencing the CoinShares amount, and they say 10,230 Bitcoin. So I think things can go lots of different ways. But for me, part of the big thing is, I think we have to remember, quantum doesn't just affect crypto. It affects all kinds, of signatures, identity, all kinds of other things. And so when we think also about the movement of these long existing rails for payments and others, right, for the financial system onto distributed ledger technology, that's something where we really need to be thinking, okay, how do we make sure that if we're moving this huge aircraft carrier, right, we're not, my analogy is failing, or cruise ship, we're turning the cruise ship, how do we make sure that we're not, plotting for something that's not going to turn out well?
Yeah, and Josh, to that point, it is not just Ethereum that's figuring out about quantum. It is, it is banked, and it is government, and it is technology companies, and it is IBM. It is so there are a lot of really smart people looking at this. We've only got a minute or two, Josh, David, if we could. I'm going to ask David to do some crystal ball work, Josh. I've got to ask. David, here's my hypothesis.
Okay.
If the current conflict lasts less than 8 weeks, which is the number we keep seeing in the news, and the jobs data holds and gives the Fed runway to cut interest rates 4 times, which is what I think some firms are anticipating, is it risk on number go up for the second half of 2026?
So I'm gonna, my crystal ball is we're gonna look into it a little more because it's still a little cloudy. But one thing I do believe is that the second half of the year is going to do well, because I think that the Trump administration will want the economy stronger in time for the midterms.
And we may have clarity in place by then as well.
We may have clarity in place. And I think you're asking the right questions, Ron. I just really believe that we must have war gamed this scenario with regarding the Strait of Hormuz. And I just believe that, we're only like 6 or 7 days into this. And even if we didn't anticipate Iran sort of just carpet bombing and spraying bombs across every neighbor it has in the Middle East, I think that we have a game plan, and I'm very much a believer in our military, and I do believe that in the next weeks to two that this issue with the strait's going to get resolved.
And
David,
also,
Josh,
we've had this stuff with Venezuela and getting
Yeah.
there have been so many moving pieces that
Yes.
I read an article, I think in the New York Post yesterday, that was talking about like all of the moves and whether it could all be part of a larger strategy, like from talking about
Yeah.
Greenland and everything else. And I think it must be, right? Like it must be, like, to your point, I think somebody game theoried it, right? And did a prisoner's dilemma and all these other sorts of
Ooh.
challenges. But
I think next week we should do a little geopolitical piece, because I definitely have some thoughts and views on it. But I do think we need to remember that, now we are selling Venezuelan oil too. So that's another source of oil going to the general market that wasn't there before.
Yep.
So,
and it's the first time in a long time, David, we're not hearing during wartime talks about tapping into the strategic petroleum reserve and all that. Like there seems to be, Josh, to your point, this thinking in the background that's played out around, well, we don't have to worry about oil because of Venezuela, because of things that we don't know publicly. It is interesting times, my friends.
yeah.
And I was
sorry.
Go for it.
Sorry. I was just going to say, it's funny to me. I had a thought, David was like, you're asking the right questions, Ron. And in my head, up until that, I was going to make a joke about Ron. I think for David's crystal ball, we just have to give it the right prompts. But then like, it was so funny that David then said you're asking the right
prompt
questions.
engineering was off for David's crystal ball, which I'm pretty sure is a magic 8-ball from the 70s somewhere in his apartment. Which I'm definitely going to get us a magic 8-ball from Amazon somehow. Josh, David, thank you both so much. We're just about out of time. Lots of work coming up. Josh's quantum webinar, OCC, ridiculously long requests for comments that we have to work on. Our Washington trip, which looks like it might be later in April now. I'll keep you both posted, but let's leave it there. David, Josh, last comments, final words?
I think I'm really curious to see like what happens geopolitically in the next week. Because not only do I think that'll affect the markets, but I also think, perhaps it will, if we get some more steady state, maybe that helps the focus go back to clarity. So I think that's a big focus of ours for the next week.
Yep, agreed. All right, my friends, we will leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us, LinkedIn Live and YouTube and X. If you have additional questions that we missed, drop us a note, info@wsba.co. We will leave it there, everyone. Have a great weekend.
And I hope to see anyone who goes to Boca for the FIA conference next week.
Track Josh down in Boca. It's a great conversation. Josh, thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.